My strategy was like, you know what? Let's go to Seattle, dominate Seattle, and Trojan horse our way back into SF, which ended up working brilliantly. We used a lot of growth strategies.
I read about that. What does that mean?
It's just like, we couldn't use user acquisition because it was like $18, $15 to get per user. Yep. And then like buying shots at a bar near Amazon was $12. So we're like, oh, it's cheaper. Let's just buy shots for everybody if they download our app. That's actually a really good story. I don't think I've ever talked about this. The guy was just like, hey man, I just left Microsoft last week. I just really wanted to tell you. I was in an elevator with Satya and I saw him blast open the blind app. I just wanted you guys to know.
Wow.
And we're just like, no way. And there will be days you never see sunlight. And one time there was entire weeks where not a single person will talk to you. And you're making 70 calls a day, 80, right? It's just voicemails and people hanging up on you, right? So you really have to have grit, I think. I don't think I've ever talked about this publicly, but I'm learning that human nature and capitalism are forces that we must respect, right? And what started out as something that could have been meaningful to the world, the ethos of crypto was originally about commonwealth. And I think we lost sight of that as an industry.
Now, if you go back, you had a chance to speak to Alex then, maybe 12, 13 years old Alex. What do you think you would say to him when he was lost, he wasn't sure which direction in life he should take?
I mean, the reality is, I'll be honest, like I look back at my career, I've never been
Hi Alex, glad to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
I know it's a long flight, you've been traveling all over the world, but really glad I managed to catch you for this episode because this would be a very interesting one for me. I think we've met more than 2-3 years ago. We've always kept in touch, yes. Gave advice every time when you come to Singapore, bring you for desserts and everything. So this one is something that's close to my heart. And I think for all the past interviews that I've done, where I thought was really interesting is because you came from a Web2 background. You've seen how businesses that scaled over 100 million people. You've took that into venture. You've took that into your own startup in crypto as well. So I want to peel back the layers of the onion and slowly go through all of that.
All right.
I want to start by asking you a question. For those people who are closest to you, how do you think they would describe Alex?
Me? Oh, you're starting with the hard questions. Those that are closest to me. I think the ones that are actually very close to me say that I'm the most authentic guy that they know. But I'm often misunderstood, is what they say. I think it's because largely my background has been in sales, and I tend to put up this very eccentric, salesy front, right? And especially I do a lot of cross-border stuff, and there's there's a huge cultural delta, right? Especially in Asia. So oftentimes in Asia, they're like, you're very aggressive. And I'm like, no, I'm intense. There's a difference, right? So there's a lot of that going on, I think. Yeah. But, I like to kind of straddle that line between like that tightrope between overkill and just enough, Yeah.
Can you walk me through a little bit about how it was like in the early years of your upbringing? Maybe from the years of 12 to 18, where were you? What kind of influences, what kind of environment were you in?
I grew up probably very different than most people or in the industry. Like, I don't think I've ever talked about this publicly, but I grew up in a really rough background. I grew up with no parents, right? I didn't live with my dad until I was 9. I didn't know at the time, but I grew up in this southern part of Seattle, Tacoma Federal Way, area code 253. Woot woot. And like my high school graduation rate was like 46, 47%. And I didn't know that was weird. I didn't know that was weird until I went to college, right? And suddenly all my minority friends weren't around, right? So very rough, right? Yeah, rough upbringing. Rough in the sense when you look back now in retrospect. But for me, that's just middle America,
How was it like growing up? Do you feel like you had to fend for yourself? You had to be independent?
I think a lot of it was you just grow up in the streets, right? And you become street smart, right? Like you hustle. I think I was like singing Pokemon cards or something to make money. I was hustling Yu-Gi-Oh cards in junior high to make money, right? A lot of it was that, right? And then it's like you have like bros, right? So one time a bunch of my friends got arrested, and I had to get their back, stuff like that, because I was like the only Asian kid with good grades, even though I was living a very degenerate life. There's a lot of that. I think that translates into, like, in retrospect, it translates into a lot of my career kind of choices and or behaviors.
Yep.
Right.
With that kind of upbringing, I think, you also tend to have to be very self-reliant. You have to, have a lot of self-confidence. I think you started your career in big tech. DocuSign, Google. Help me understand from someone with, no support system, no true train into this industry. How do you kind of make your big break into the industry?
I'll be honest. I wanted to be like a musician. I wanted to be like a magician. But, I have Asian parents. So that wasn't in the cards for me. Pun intended.
Got that.
And I didn't even want to go to college because none of my friends went to college. But of course, it's like if you don't go to college, your Korean dad will kill you, right? So it's like college or die. I applied to one school, and just because it was like the biggest school in my neighborhood, University of Washington. And then once I got there, I just took it one step at a time. I never had like a grandiose vision of what I wanted to be. All I wanted was to do better than my upbringing, which was middle class at best. Because I grew up very close to the poverty line, right? Tech, I don't know. Like, I had really crappy grades in school, mostly because I didn't study and I didn't buy any textbooks because I had to pay my own way through school. So I purposely took classes where I can like get the grades. Minimum input, maximum output, right? And it just so happens to be, I graduated 2010, which is like coming off of 2 years of really, really bear market in the US. People had no jobs leaving college, right? And I wasn't like the stellar A student. I didn't even try to apply to like all the big companies in Seattle. And we have a lot of them. We have Starbucks, Expedia, Costco, Microsoft, Amazon, all of that stuff. And that was never in the cards for me. So I literally just, I took an internship at a small startup called DocuSign. And I think I was their first college hire.
No way.
And I remember all we did was just cold call. Like, I didn't know what SaaS was. SaaS was still kind of an up-and-coming terminology at the time. It was 2010, 2009. And I cut my teeth. But I think being the magician background that I am made me a very good cold call sales guy.
And
right.
I read that, in your early years of DocuSign and Google, you were a top performer. You would always hit your sales target. You achieve, the departmental objectives. Like, how do you know that?
You know what I learned? That's actually a really good story. I don't think I've ever talked about this. I was really bad because like there's no training. They're like, you show up to the office and they're like, I need you to make $24,000 a month. It resets every month. And here's your phone, here's your computer, set it up and go. Literally all it was, right? And you're like this like loser college kid trying to cold call people, real estate brokers and agents, and they're like hanging up on you left and right. And I was really demotivated. But at this one time, I called this manager, it's like sales manager. I don't know what he does. And halfway through the call, he was like, hey, what's your name? And I was like, my name is Alex, sir. And he's like, I got 20 kids in my office doing what you're doing. You're better than all of them.
No way.
And then he hung up on me. But I think that gave me the mojo, right? And like once you started believing yourself, having that confidence, I think sales is all about confidence. Mm-hmm. If you're uncomfortable, like in an interview or any sort of sales scenario, the interviewee or the counterparty is always going to be uncomfortable. That's not what you want. And I think that's when my tone changed. That's when my numbers started scaling. And then that's when I got this nickname. I was just crushing revenue. They called me, because I was the only Asian guy on the floor, and my last name is Shin. So they called me the revenue machine. Right? And then I just started crushing it. And cold call was kind of my jam. Right? Yeah. And DocuSign, now that you look back, it wasn't until I went to Google afterwards that I realized DocuSign sales team was like world class. Because, we had this phone system and you can listen to everybody else real-time calls, right? And everybody's like has their stylistic approach to sales. We have one guy that was like super formal. One guy's talking about sports. So one guy would pick up the phone and be like, Domino's Pizza, want to hear about our specials? Like on a sales call. And I remember thinking that's crazy, right? But these guys had the confidence to kind of figure out their own jive.
And doing sales, we know that it's normally a 99% no, 1% yes kind of situation.
Yeah.
How was it like at a young age being comfortable with rejection?
I don't think anybody should be comfortable with it. It's hard. I mean, Seattle in the wintertime, the sun sets at 4 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
So there'll be days, because I get to the office at 6:30, right? And you start calling at 7 until 4. And there'll be days you never see sunlight. And at one time, there was entire weeks where not a single person will talk to you. And you're making 70 calls a day, 80, right? It's just voicemails and people hanging up on you, right? So you really have to have grit, I think. But I was fortunate. I was fortunate enough to have like good performance. So like you feel like you're making progress. So some of the guys that like never hit quota, I think they just fall into this confidence like downward spiral, right? And you got to get yourself out of it. You got to take a break. Got to go play with the dog. Oh, you still love me, right? Right? Like it's a psyche game, right? Because the skills are a lot of the times trainable, but it's like how much mental fortitude do you have?
Yep.
I think that's a lot of what sales is about, at least in the earlier stages. Yeah.
And that led you to your stint at Google, where, comparing to DocuSign, this is skills much larger, right? I'm guessing this is when they had thousands of employees. The sales team might have, different regions. Like, how was that like in a much larger scale sales team?
I didn't do any work at Google. It was like Taco Tuesdays, yoga, sambas. This is like the heydays, right? Yeah. And I was like a lowly enterprise sales associate working on Google Earth Geo. And, the whole point of Google was if it doesn't scale, don't do it, which is a whole different thing from DocuSign. And I remember one time, there was a Google Earth Pro paid version. And we had like tens of thousands of inbound emails of people asking for demos. And I remember I was like, the DocuSign guy in me, I was like, damn, if we can convert 0.01%, that'd be like 5 times our annual quota. But then Google was like, these guys didn't sign off a waiver. And I think it's a violation of privacy to cold call these people. Whereas the DocuSign cold caller in me was like, oh, it's just free money, But I realized like that really reset the way you think about the world and the business. Google, mostly for the most, I was only there for a year. Mostly it was just the mentors I met. I was fortunate enough to sit next to people that were some of the early employees at Google, and just seeing their life and seeing how they see the world really changed my perspective. I think that's when my career really took a shift.
Interesting, because you said that at DocuSign you learn kind of pulling your sleeves up, doing the work, and every opportunity is a chance for you to close.
Yeah.
At Google, it wasn't as quote unquote intense, but you saw skill. You had mentors. Like, do you remember
Google,
what it?
I learned so much. Like Google was like less about work, because it was like, okay, we're getting 10,000 emails a day. How do we not reply to 10,000 emails? It's like stuff like that. We're like optimizing, outsourcing, da 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 da. But then, during lunch, I still remember during lunch, I was really stressed out. I have some like very serious family troubles, and I was like, what do I do about this situation? And then one of my mentors, he's like a director at Google at the time, and he's African, came up to me, was like, what is the problem? Right? I was like, I got this situation with my mom, da 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 da. And he's like, your drama is no drama. I have 24 brothers and sisters. And I was like, I have 5 moms, right? And it put things into perspective. I think that for the first time in my career made me think like, damn, there's like, when you're like a L2, 3 at Google, like a director seems like far. Yep. And guys like that telling me like your drama's not a drama. Again, just great mentors. I met great mentors at Google.
And through that career in big tech, doing sales, how did that lead you to, I guess, one of the key milestones of your career, which is at Blind?
Let's see. So actually, right after Google, I went to a biotech startup called Counsel, which was actually co-founded by Balaji Srinivasan. And I went there because my mentor, one of my, on my team, was like an angel investor. And he was like, hey, man, I've been in San Francisco forever. This is the smartest dude I've ever met. Just go. I was like, I don't know anything about no bio. He's like, just go, right? I learned a lot about sales on the field because I was traveling into like medical centers to try to sell diagnostics tests to doctors. Like that's a whole different game, right? And then it wasn't until after that I realized like the worst thing that can happen to me is probably upper middle class, which is considerably better than my upbringing. And so I was ready to take on a little bit more risk. And I had read somewhere that there's more startups per capita in South Korea than anywhere else in the world, right? And I was like, that can't be true. I don't know any Korean startups. And around that time, there was this big scandal about the Korean Air nut rage thing. And that happened to blow up on this workplace pseudonymous app called Blind. And so one of the founders happened to be in the Bay Area because they were very ambitious. I would say miscalibrated almost. And they wanted to launch in the US with no funding, nothing. It was like just a garage band group of Koreanos. And all my friends are like, don't do it, dude. Get a real job. But for me, I was like, there's never been a Korean consumer app that got meaningful traction in the US. This is binary. I can spend 3 to 6 months and we'll know if it works or doesn't work, right? So I thought, it's positive EV, let's run for it. So that's how it started. Yeah.
I mean, today it cuts across almost every big company. I think the last stats I saw, it's used by more than employees across 100,000 companies. And this is all the largest tech companies in the US. We haven't even talked about those that are outside the US. Like, you saw that happening. You knew someone in SF. How was your entrance towards, being the US co-founder for Blind?
I mean, it was pretty natural. It was just me and this one dude named Kyum, right? He was skinny. I was rounder. And we didn't have any resources. We didn't have any engineering. We didn't have any design. It's like a random group in Korea running it. In retrospect, I think Blind had 2 really killer product market fit features, right? One was the fact that there's only 2 ways to build trust in any sort of business scenario, right? Any sort of sales scenario. It's shared experience or shared secret. You meet somebody new and you were in the same class or something, or you have the same professor. Immediately there's a layer of trust, shared experience. Most times assume that's not going to happen. And shared experience, shared secret is you two know something that most people don't know. So founders that are fundraising, sometimes it makes sense to drop a little secret early on to see if you can get that hook. I like to be like, the future is ABC. And then when the founder's like, the VC's like, I get it. I'd be like, just kidding. It's XYZ because of this, right? Now you got something, right? That kind of idea. Blind had one-way salted hashed email verification. So everybody on the app had to do this really uncomfortable thing of verifying through your email, which made our go-to-market and growth strategy like inordinately difficult, right? Because it's like the app looked like it was made by a bunch of Chinese developers with their feet, and you have to put in your work email, right? But once we got out of that hurdle, which is a whole different problem, we used a lot of anti-growth strategies.
I read about that. What does that mean?
It's just like, we couldn't use user acquisition because it was like $18, $15 to get per user. Yep. And then like buying shots at a bar near Amazon was $12. So we're like, it's cheaper. Let's just buy shots for everybody if they download our app. Stuff like that. Or we would make little posters, right? Because Microsoft had an anonymous app website called Mini Microsoft, like 20 years ago. And one of the OG Microsoft guys are like, somebody says he was kidnapped or he was bought out. So we thought it'd be hilarious to write Mini Microsoft 2.0. And then we made a little flyer, and then we would sneak into campus at night and post them everywhere. Because Microsoft is a small city. We read the regulation. It was basically like $70 or something per violation and like 30 days in jail. And I remember my co-founder and I were like, they're not going to catch both of us. Then we're dead. 30 days, no. Makes sense. So we did a lot of that stupid stuff. We made fortune cookies. I typed out like jokes, like error 404, your fortune not found here, download Blind. And we would hand them out at like Google bus stations and Netflix bus stations because they would bus employees. Yeah. Really retarded things like that.
And one thing people would say about social network is it's hard to get network effects, right? You have to hit a certain activation energy, a certain bar, right? So what was the strategy? Is it let's go hard at one company for a month?
We spent like 6 months just on Amazon. I swear to God, I download like Coffee Meets Bagel and Tinder. I don't even know if I should be saying this. And if it said anything like Amazon Eng or PM, I'm like, right? And we would meet for coffee and I would just pitch them Blind. And it took a few months, but we ended up with a group of 4 or 5 people that were like our champions. They were like, we'll get this done. Because when you build a consumer app, especially Blind, most consumer apps are one of 2 phenomenons: is get laid or get paid, right? And Instagram is the biggest dating app. Language Exchange, that's a dating app. Book Club, dating app. Even Netflix is like dating infra, right? Blind is weird because it's pseudonymous. Ain't nobody dating on Blind. So we have to go the other way, right? But I'm not an Amazon employee. I can't really write the juicy stuff, right? And when you don't have photos and names, what are you going to trust? The voice. And so we did the right thing of focusing on just getting 100 high quality users, not 10,000 people. And it's really important that they don't talk crap or like they say stupid things. You know, we want like 90% like info, 10% troll. You want a little bit of that troll, right? And I think that was a really important distinction. Because at the time, there was many anonymous apps. Sequoia was investing in Yik Yak. That was one of the biggest misses they've done ever, right? And for a hot minute, everybody thought this anonymous apps, because they were scaling so fast, they thought it could be the next Facebook. But we went the other route and scaled very slow, which ended up working really well. It's kind of the Reddit model.
Yeah, now that you mention it, it's so much harder to scale because one, ads targeting might not really be the best strategy or could be too expensive. You don't have a profile picture, you don't have a name, you don't have anything. All you have is
when you don't have
handle.
hot faces, it's hard, yo. Yeah, and like, you know, traditional triggers, like the like is dopamine, follow is clout, the blue check mark is valid. We don't have those triggers to start with, right? So our only choice was voice, which basically is it's uncomfortable as hell. Work email, am I gonna get in trouble, right? But I hear rumors about this layoff. I really gotta read this shit. And then the first piece of content you read, you're like, is this guy on my floor? Like that was the magic. And we knew that this was working because, and any consumer app founders will agree, if your retention is gangster, it's working. It's working. And our retention cohort was better than Instagram. Like once we got them, they won't leave, right? And so it was slow, but we knew it was working. There was no leaks in the bucket, right?
The reason I can relate to that is I remember 2016, 2017 when I first used my work email to sign up, I had the exact same concerns. Is that an email going to be sent to HR?
Exactly.
Can anybody export the list here? If I say something, is it actually anonymous?
Yeah.
You know, what if HR is also one of those anonymous person and, you know, we strike a conversation? Like,
yeah.
Do you recall any blockers that could have derailed your plans?
Oh, dude, we had so many in the beginning, right? Subpoenas, they're great. I have some of them on my fridge. No, the killer one was we're launching an Microsoft, and Microsoft was growing really fast, right? And we were worried about like November, December. Like I don't know if you know about American tech companies, but in the winter, ain't nobody around. So our engagement would just fall off a cliff, and we're like, we have to survive this, right? But then at the same time, Microsoft launched a competing app called Forum. It was made by Microsoft. It was beautiful. Had real UI, right? They had like the VP of benefits do AMAs. And I was like, oh, dude, we're so dead. But then all the Microsoft users, they began testing the app like traditional autistic engineers would, right? They would post the same content on both to see what kind of responses they would get. And they would start posting on the Microsoft app like, hey, can you see our data? Can you see your data? And then obviously, eventually the PM was like, actually, you know, it's one of our servers, As soon as that was verified, everybody left.
Interesting.
And they all came to Blind. So it was free marketing for us.
Wow.
Good validation.
They basically set it up for you guys to succeed.
I don't think intentionally, but it worked. Same with Amazon. A really famous journalist out of New York Times wrote this article. I forgot his name. And he wrote this article saying Amazon is a brutal place to work. And I think it went completely viral. And people talked about like warehouse employees passing out. And there was like ambulances outside. Full-grown men like crying in the office, right? And on the outside, all the Amazon executives and were saying, Amazon's not like that, But then on Blind, everybody's like, oh yeah, no, for sure. Like people were like, dude, somebody's crying at the desk today, right now. He's crying right now. Grown man, right? And I think we built a lot of trust at that moment because Amazon's hiring pipeline went to zero that day.
No way.
Right? And rumors about that went around on app. So like, it just worked. It worked like a charm. And then once we had Amazon and Microsoft in Seattle, we started using user acquisition to pour all the other companies in. Because our goal was Silicon Valley had really bad reputation or perception of anonymous apps because Secret came and fucked it up. And Zuckerberg on an all-hands meeting was like, I'm really disappointed in you guys. And everybody deleted Secret on the same day. So my strategy was like, you know what? Let's go to Seattle, dominate Seattle, and Trojan horse our way back into SF, which ended up working brilliantly. Yeah.
And I think there's a interesting milestone during the life cycle of Blind, which was, of course, during the expose of Uber, right? This is when, Susan really shared about her story and what kind of discrimination she was facing. I think in an article you mentioned that you kind of saw a growth spike during one of those days of signups.
Yeah, well, there was a couple of times when we almost died. Even before that, it was like we had like 3 weeks of runway. We're like, all right, this is it. And then Marissa Mayer laid off all of Yahoo. We're back in the game. And then Google Manifesto happened, and then Microsoft bought LinkedIn, and it blew up on Blind. Before, I'm looking at our GA data, like, why did like 10% of LinkedIn join on a Sunday? And then Monday, like, the announcement goes out, and I wish I bought some stocks or something. I don't know. We weren't that sophisticated back then. And then the Uber thing. Although now that you think about it, there was more drama to the Uber fiasco than we had thought. I feel like the Susan Fowler thing was more of a front because there was a lot of wars that Travis was fighting with Gurley and Benchmark and the whole IPO scenario, bringing Dara in, right? Now that I get the Silicon Valley game, the capital markets game, that makes more sense. But Blind was an incredible tool. Like we had, I think, conservatively, we had a third of Uber on the app almost 5 hours a day.
No way.
And we thought it was like a bug. We thought like something was wrong or their security team was trying to break our systems. But a lot of Bay Area VCs called that week and was like, hey, my husband's an executive at Uber. All they ever talk about is Blind. And we knew something was working, right?
Wow.
Another fun story is Glassdoor hit me up.
Okay.
And the CEO was like, hey, come over. And we're so excited because we wanted to partner with them. This is before they were acquired by Recruit.
Yep.
And I remember in the meeting, the CEO was like, hey, man, to be honest, this app really hurt my feelings for the first 2 weeks. And then afterwards, I just couldn't stop. I'm just on it every day, right? And then he realized that this is what they should have built.
No way.
And the really funny thing is at the end of the meeting, we couldn't strike anything because they said they're working on a big deal, which later ended up being the M&A. But on the way out of the meeting, he was like, hey, man, I did an all hands today, but why is nobody talking about it? And then one of the VPs was like, oh, no, I'll post it. And then he posted a poll. And I think that was another moment where I was like, oh, wow, it's like even leadership is on this thing, right?
This was like even back in Asia, this was like the secret Facebook that everybody knew what everybody was talking about, but nobody explicitly said about it. And I can attest to that. Every time there's a town hall, peer review, bonus time, like that was the site when everybody went to check.
We actually don't know who these users are either, because there's no such thing as a perfect system. Yeah. So the Blind architects, and we have a patent for this pre-zero knowledge proofs, was designed so that even we wouldn't know.
Yep.
Another story is like a VP of product, VP of engineer from Reddit messaged us, and we're so excited. They're going to want to do something with us. Because, but we didn't talk about Reddit at all. The guy was just like, hey, man, I just left Microsoft last week. I just really wanted to tell you. I was in an elevator with Satya, and I saw him blast open the Blind app. I just wanted you guys to know.
Wow.
And we're just like, no way.
And the interesting thing is because nobody uses their real name, they use like some funny username. So sometimes I don't even know whether is that like the senior executive in that conversation.
You never know.
Like, I don't know the source of it.
Some CEOs did really cool things where they would dox themselves at an all hands meeting. I think the Glassdoor CEO did that, right? And I still remember the very first day Dara came to Uber, the very first all hands meeting, the very first question was, have you read Blind?
Whoa.
And then one of my friends who was an engineer at Uber was texting me real time. He was like, oh my God, dude, first question is Blind, right? So we knew we were doing something really big. And then, towards my departure, we were trying to figure out HR tech, right? Because we feel like we have at the time our DAU was like stay time, retention was like 42, 44 minutes per DAU. YouTube's like 46. It's just crazy, right? But I think with the market the way it is today, the recruiting and the hiring markets where it is today, I think that part's been taking a little longer. Yeah.
And, you're a young startup, all of this traction that's happening. someone has to pay the bills, right? I know you guys raised a bunch of funds. I think it totaled around 40, 50 mil.
Yeah.
What kind of monetization strategies do you guys try?
I think for now, and to the CEO's name is Moon. To his credit, he was really able to scale our ads business in Korea. I think they're doing like 17, 18 million a year. It's not bad, right? And then the US team is beginning to figure out monetization and different strategies. They just brought on a new US CEO. His name is Sherman. And Sherman was our partner at SoftBank Ventures Asia. He's fantastic. So I haven't caught up with them on what they're cooking now because it's quite recent, but I'm really excited to see what Sherman can do, right?
One thing I'm curious about is you've seen the users across different geography use Blind. Are there any habits or patterns that differs country to country?
Country to country?
So, for example, what came to mind was in US, people are a lot more outspoken.
Oh,
right?
for sure. Yeah.
Compared to maybe somewhere in Korea or Asia where people are a bit more reserved. I'm curious, like, how different is it?
You know, the really interesting takeaway is these community apps are very much like just people, right? So in the beginning, it's like everyone's kind of figuring out the game. Everyone talks about salary, the cute girl in the office, office rumors. If you go to Blind right now in the US, like the Microsoft channel, and some young kid's like, hi, what's the compensation for so-and-so? The community will shun him, be like, hey, bro, I think you're new. You clearly don't know what you're doing here. Like, take some time to understand this ecosystem before you start talking. It's a very mature ecosystem, and it varies by company. I think Koreans, we're a very homogenous and very uniform society. They're more worried about their privacy and getting in trouble for some of the things that they do. So they're very, very careful about being private. But also, like, we're much bigger in Korea. We're bigger than LinkedIn, right? Literally like 60% of white collars in the country are Blind. So now it's like, it's crazy now. It's if everything's like, we have police officers, we have lawyers, we have doctors, everybody's on the app, right? So like, I feel like there's Blind after dark in Korea. Literally like at night, like women will post selfies and then delete it. And then their DMs will blow up. And it's like, they're using it for dating. Like, it's not intended to. Yeah, but people are getting really creative with Blind, and it's kind of become its own thing. Yeah.
You mentioned that there were times where you guys had to face subpoenas. Things like workplace discrimination at Uber popped up, and all this content happened on Blind, right? Do you feel some kind of responsibility, or do you ever feel that it was a role in the company to kind of nudge these conversations, or was it always just in a place to be a platform and we're not going to do anything?
I think one of the right decisions we made early on was to never interject our voice. We never had any onboarding, at least when I was there. Like, hi, be nice to each other, because we didn't want to seem like anybody from the outside was here telling you what to do, looking at your content. It's your space, right? And one of the reasons why Blind is like your company channel and you swipe over and it's like intercompany channel is, and the color changes and everything, because we wanted to signify like, be who you want to be here, be who you want to be there. Like, it's an identity play, right? So no, I think some of the harder moderation topics were, for a hot minute, when a lot of the wars in the Middle East were going on, there'd be some debates about like Islam, Muslims and stuff like that on the app. And those are difficult things to moderate. And there was a lot of decisions we made that were anti-growth, like during COVID when Clubhouse was having their moment. We were like, what if we dropped the voice app on Blind? And I remember the founders and I were all sitting together at an Airbnb in Oakland, and we're like, yeah, that's a unicorn tomorrow. But that's also jail time, right? Because like everybody's at home. Imagine 30,000 Amazon employees talking anonymously, real-time voice on Blind, right? And we can give them like a Bezos voice filter. Yeah, so like there's product decisions we could have made that could have blown up the app, but we also think that it would have opened up a lot of regulatory attack vectors, right? So we kept it off. Right? There's a lot of ideas like that too.
I find it fascinating that you describe this as anti-growth hacks, but this is what it takes to protect the integrity and the longevity of the app.
You really have to protect the integrity of the users, I think. Once you lose that, I think it's just a downward spiral.
You started at DocuSign and Google, that showed you what big tech, what scale was like. At Blind, growth hacks, fortune cookies, pasting posters. And there was the next milestone, which was your introduction into venture. Like, do you remember how was that? Like,
Oh yeah, no, it was retarded. We're all like risk appetite startup guys. None of us I don't know financial background. I'm like fake Asian. I don't math. I don't code, right? And in 17, long before 2017, Simon, who's the CEO of Hashed, used to crash on my couch in San Francisco, his previous startup. And then I remember he came April 2017 and told me about Ethereum, right? And he had made so much money. And he's like, let's have the most expensive steak in San Francisco. I was like, what's going on, right? And I learned more about it. And it was totally, I wasn't a buyer. I wasn't a believer until after he left. And a few months later, the Kimchi premium went crazy. Mm-hmm. For those of you guys that don't know, crypto was trading at a 50% premium, every coin. Which means if you just bought Bitcoin sold in Korea, you made 50%. Because Korea has crazy cap controls. And then everybody in the Bay, all the VCs, everybody was calling me about Korea. The founders funds, the Bessemers, the Lightspeeds. Maybe because I'm one of the only Korean founders they know. But for a hot minute, I was like, oh shit, this might be sign from God, right? And I sat at a Phil's Coffee on Berry Street. It was right next to my house, my favorite coffee shop. Balaji used to always drink coffee there.
Nice.
And then some Indian kid came up to me and was like, hey man, you in crypto? You Korean? And I remember looking up from my laptop like, it's a sign from God. Because the last time anybody asked me about Korea was Gangnam Style, So I called Simon and, he knew a lot more about crypto. I didn't know anything. I was just a sales guy. And I was like, yo, I think we got to do this thing. And he's like, come to Shanghai, right? Wanchang conference. That's the first one I went to. First person I met, Vitalik.
No way.
Yeah, and he came to me and was like, hey, do you know who I am? And we're like, selfie time. And ultimately, those projects used that selfie to pump their coin. Weird days back then, right? And then I did both jobs for a while. And then about 6 months in, blind founders are like, hey man, how's this crypto thing going? I was like, it's blowing up. And he's like, hey, you should just go full time. And then if it doesn't work, come back to blind. It's like, deal. And so that's how it started. We didn't know anything about capital markets. We didn't know like 100xing your money every couple months was weird. I didn't know. So Hash was a crazy, crazy ride. And I was very fortunate. That, there was like 40% of all trading volume was just Korea at the time. And everybody wanted to play in Disneyland. And Hash was kind of the market entry fund. And there was only like 8-9 funds in the whole world, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we started just early enough to see all the crazy stuff happen. Yeah.
From the outside, the experience at Blind and at Hash, which is one of the largest crypto VC in Asia, seems like it's on a different path. But my take is actually on the exact same path. Because at Blind, it was all about protecting integrity,
Sure.
Making sure that everybody had an equal voice. And in crypto, I think, your early entrance into Ethereum, that was also the way it's built, right? And I think through the journey of Hash, I think Fund 1, you raised like 120 mil. Fund 2, I think this was like 3-4 years ago, hit the 200 mil. So maybe cumulatively, probably $500 million already. Do you recall that you said you had no capital markets experience,
It was way crazier than that.
Tell me
so
about it.
I left mid-2019 as they were raising Fund 1. I wasn't part of the whole venture arm, right? It was a prop fund in the beginning because there wasn't a lot of financial infrastructure for us to take on LP capital stuff. That's a very America thing, right? So it's just started with personal fund. And I don't think this was ever publicly disclosed. But Simon, he really carried the Korean crypto scene on his back. Many of the best entrepreneurs, many of the Hash partners, including myself, got our first batch of Ethereum from Simon. Because I remember trying to buy crypto on Coinbase, and they were like, the maximum was like $5,000. Mm-hmm. I was like, what is this? Right? And I didn't have a lot of liquidity because I was like a broke, founder. And Simon literally just gave out like, I think it was like 10,000 Ethereum or something. Just to his friends. Like, hey, let's do this together.
Man.
Right? So what a legend in that regards, right?
And you said that you never intended to go into venture. You just were looking for, money to fuel your ideas because you were a startup guy, you were an operator.
I was always a bit of a missionary than a mercenary. And I saw a rare opportunity for Korea, East Asia to be relevant and competitive in this category, right? Because even during the heydays of Blind, I was always working with big Korean corporates and and you can see the talent delta, you can see the information asymmetry, you can see like we just don't have enough data models to compete in frontier tech, AI, NLP, machine learning, computer vision, right? But crypto native, digital native mediums, we thought maybe there was a shot. We thought maybe we can take all this speculative energy that Korea had and, flip it into something a bit more productive. And so a lot of the early work was just evangelizing, and that ultimately ended up, Clayton and Luna to some degree, right? Stuff like that. So Hash started as a prop fund that went into billions. The venture came much later, and that was mostly, I think, just Simon. There was so much enterprise interest in this category, but they couldn't get direct exposure. So he took it on his back to raise that capital to start exploring. Yeah,
I was doing a bit of stalking on your social media platforms, LinkedIn, Twitter. Like 5, 6, 7 years ago, you were really passionate about crypto. You were talking about crypto. You were cross-posting articles. How was it like writing your first check, making your first investment? Because those were large numbers, and like you said, you were never a venture person, right? Do you remember how was it like?
Hey man, like the early ICO days, like we weren't signing it. We just sent ETH to like a address, like a cat emoji. Right? There was no lockups, right? It was a very fair game kind of ethos, and I do hope that comes back in crypto. Because in the advent of ICOs, a lot of Bay Area venture capital, they were really worried. They were like, $200 million in 10 minutes. This could be end of VC, right? And I enjoy the craft of venture capital. I'm not sure if the business of VC is actually conducive, right? It's arguable, but venture as a nascent category did well, but venture in many ways seems overallocated, and it just led to accelerating this American capitalism, just privatized gains and socialized losses. And, we did that to equities, right? And I feel like the Silicon Valley VCs and institutional capital figured out SAFs. I don't know if this is too deep.
No, it's good.
Yeah. They figured out SAFs, and I feel like the same situation is happening in crypto now, where it's just multiple billion-dollar rounds. The US VCs have patient capital, so you get that markup to raise subsequent LPs to bolster down AUM businesses. That's not something a lot of institutions or allocators in Asia can do, right? And then angel investors and retail tends to be the ones holding bags, right? So,
and from Blind, it took you to Hash. Now it led you to Shin Labs. Like, what's your focus at Shin Labs?
Shin Labs, we're jumping. No, it's not a real company. It's just me. I was actually hanging out in Japan a lot during COVID and towards the end of COVID. Mostly because like crypto was quite bare, and I'm a big fan of Tokyo. And then everybody there like just has a hard time comprehending like a solopreneur kind of thing. They're like, "What's your company?" I was like, "What company?" Right? So they're like, "What do you mean no company?" Right? So I just called it Shin Labs. I don't even think it's incorporated. I just called it Shin Labs. And then over time, I gradually stumbled upon getting a couple of employees, a lot of researchers, a lot of crypto degenerates. Because crypto is much deeper much more complicated and bifurcated than it used to be. Yeah. So we just do it's like a personal prop thing. We do some consulting here and there. We do some angel investing here and there. I run like a handful of validators, mostly to offset L1 bets. I don't know if anybody knows what that means. We're very tactical when it comes to crypto. I'm much deeper in crypto now than I have ever been. Yeah.
You're a big proponent of crypto, but you are also one of its biggest critic. In fact, you mentioned this before. You said the problem with crypto is crypto people.
It's so true.
Walk me through that.
I think we had a chance. I'm learning that human nature and capitalism are forces that we must respect, right? And what started out as something that could have been meaningful to the world, the ethos of crypto was originally about commonwealth. And I think we lost sight of that as an industry, right? I think people are here to extract maximum value, and it took. And a lot of the guys from 2017 are quite jaded, right? I've largely come to terms with it. And I've decided to just take a much longer approach in this category and believe that this is just how change happens. This is what happened in the dot-com bubble, right? But that is the problem with crypto, I think. A lot of people conflate luck for skill. A lot of people in crypto, a lot of people, and especially in Asia too, they've never spent time at a center of excellence, right? And so people just don't know what they don't know. Same with me, right? And so there's a lot of miscalibration going on. People conflate luck for skill, right? A lot of that. And then because a lot of this is unregulated, right? Like if it's not money, it's not crypto, right? And then the only thing you can do with crypto is more crypto. And so, we're just farming yield, and yield is good for attention, but really bad for retention, right? So we just play the same cycle over and over again, right?
I think of everybody in Web3 and in crypto, you have an edge because you have this specific experience, not only because you come from Web2, but you were one of the founders of Blind, right? And the concept of Blind is so similar to Ethereum. As you see the scaling of these two industries, are there any similarities that you can pattern match between both?
Blind and crypto. I'm not sure, but more recently, a lot of people have been hitting me up, DMs and stuff, asking about, because I think this topic of pseudo consumer is kind of bubbling up in crypto now. And everybody wants to build like Web3 Blind or something. And I keep telling them like, yo, it's not that easy. Similarities. Maybe if there's like, I've always wanted to build a consumer app in crypto, but I think you have to build the right voice. And unfortunately, I think most of the world doesn't really want to hear what crypto people have to say. So we have to figure something else out on that regards. But I do think that, the idea for Blind was like corporate structure and hierarchy is going to be here forever. But people don't join companies and want their companies to do bad, right? But their voice, there's a hierarchy wall. And, like what if we just put radical transparency there, and what is said matters more than who had said it, right? And people don't realize like Silicon Valley is not fun. We call it Man Francisco, Man Jose. I did my time, man. Like people don't go there to like fun, right? You go there to win. And information that is pertinent to your career is not available, right? And like Slack and Zoom, that's not for you. Those are corporate tools, right? LinkedIn is 17 minutes a month. That's dead. Glassdoor is twice a year. So I think we wanted to build something quite visceral, and like the sprinkling of anonymity, removes that friction. And maybe there's a way to do that in crypto. But because crypto is fundamentally a financial tool, because crypto is Web3 today, is as a means of launching a market. And communities matter because markets matter, right? So we're not sure exactly how that fits in, but there's been a lot more interest lately. I've been spending a lot more time with kind of the privacy community, like Signal Foundation and stuff like that, because I think with Pavel and the Telegram situation and just kind of the overall uncertainty in the world today, I can see the privacy narrative make a comeback and maybe changes to more of a freedom narrative, right? Yeah.
I think what you said earlier should be on printed on a t-shirt. Yield is good for attention, but it's bad for retention. I've never heard someone put it this way and put it so eloquently.
I got some crypto bars. Can't say them all because I'll get in trouble.
One thing that, as we wrap up and come to the tail end of the show, I want to bring back the conversation to the person in the seat. If you wind back the years and bring back to some of the early days of Alex's childhood, right? You mentioned that, things were rough. You didn't have the guidance of someone. Now if you go back and, you had a chance to speak to Alex then, maybe 12, 13 years old Alex, knowing all that you know right now, what do you think you would say to him when he was lost, he wasn't sure which direction in life he should take?
I mean, the reality is, I'll be honest, like I look back at my career, I've never been at a company that didn't do well. It's not me, man. It's the market. For 15 years, we had 0 interest rates, right? Cheap capital, right? Like, venture is about team, tech, product, market. And for 15 years, the tech and the market didn't matter. It was just team and product. And the world has changed now, right? So for everybody that's kind of kicking off their careers, you have to go back to the basics, right? Like you have to pick up some hard skills. Find somebody that's really good at something you want to be good at and just go. Like you want to be the best sushi chef in the world, you don't go to school for that, right? I think I was just fortunate. It has nothing to do with, I don't think like real startup entrepreneurs wake up one day like I want to solve this problem like Elon and stare into the abyss and chew glass. No, dude, like most founders I know just couldn't get a real job. No, really. It's just like their only alternative is like, let's just go to the startup and go hustle, right? For a hot minute, like operators who made some money were like, hey, I'm going to go raise venture and run for it. But you see this in crypto. I call it minimum viable rug, right? Because like launching internet securities is tricky now, right? And founders that have meaningful capital reputation, like that risk reward may or may not make sense, right? So entrepreneurship, foundership has more to do with your risk appetite, your moral compass, than like product. And one of my mentors, David Lee, said this like 13 years ago, founder market fit. It's much more about that than it's product market fit. And I think I grew up, in the hood and kind of slums. And, for a hot minute, I was hanging out with the rich dudes, rubbing elbows with billionaires. And it just is not me, I like being in the fringes. I like hanging out with young kids. So what I learned from my Google mentor, he was like 50, partying with me in Vegas, right? He's figured out the youth of life, the fountain of youth, I would say. It's like he always has a fresh set of 22-year-olds, smart, that are coming into Google and showing him kind of the new young way of seeing the world. And I think that's what I enjoy. So to each their own, but I think definitely figure out your risk appetite because you end up being like a lifestyle founder. Right? Because it's just cool to be a founder. But actually getting product to work, getting customers, that shit's hard, man. Yeah.
I mean, hearing you say that, it makes me feel like you're just someone that, don't take recognition. And you said it's not you, it's everything around you, right? And I think that grittiness, that humbleness keeps you curious, wanting to learn more and keep drawing you to the right place, the right time. And I think that's something that, even for myself, this is one of my biggest takeaway today.
Thank you. No, literally every week I'm like, I'm retarded. Like something happens, I meet some young kid and I'm like, fuck, he's right. I'm retarded. Right. And I think as long as that doesn't stop, I'm gonna keep doing this.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your story.
Yeah, man.
It was lovely having you, Alex.
For sure. Thank you.